Well, it's now being reported that two sets of classified Pentagon documents, about 100 pages worth, have been circulating on various sites like Twitter, Discord, 4chan, and Telegram, and have been circulating for a couple of months. Now, most of the documents relate to the war in Ukraine, but some also reveal U.S. spying on allies like Israel and South Korea. And the leak is in the form of photographs of the documents. Now, one of the most discussed aspects of the leaks are regarding the casualty numbers in the war in Ukraine. Nobody knows where these documents came from nor who leaked them. We don't know if this is someone inside the State Department or the Pentagon. We literally know nothing about where these documents came from and who leaked them. So keep that in mind as more information comes out regarding these documents. So what's in them? Well, the documents show Ukraine is in deep, and it's not looking good. The casualty numbers show Ukrainians killed at a 4-to-1 ratio to the Russians. Of course, the narrative now is that these are doctored numbers, but really, when you look at it, the numbers correlate with those given by both the EU's Ursula von der Leyen and Mossad over the past several months. The documents show Ukraine is going to run out of air defense missiles by early May, and that U.S. officials doubt Ukraine's ability to pull off some of their planned offenses against Russia. The docs show that NATO does in fact have some forces on the ground, including 14 Americans. The documents show the U.S. government is spying on Zelensky, but according to a source close to Zelensky, he says, that's unsurprising. Ultimately, they show an outlook that isn't so great for Ukraine, but nothing we already didn't suspect. But what's ruffling feathers are the leaks that show U.S. spying on various allies, including Israel and South Korea, and their internal discussions about whether or not they would provide Ukraine with artillery shells and other types of weaponry. Also, the documents show the U.S.'s ability to spy on Russian operations, meaning they have people inside, on the other side, leaking information, which is very embarrassing and alarming to Russia, of course. Now, there are a lot of questions surrounding these leaks, but of course, the U.S. government is trying to cover it up so we don't question anything. Here's John Kirby telling reporters not to report on these leaked documents.
Again, without confirming the validity of the documents, this is information that has no business in the public domain. It has no business, if you don't mind me saying, on the pages of front pages of newspapers or on television. It is not intended for public consumption, and it should not be out there.
Well, there he is saying that journalists should not be reporting on this big news. With us now is Wyatt Reed, investigative journalist. Well, Wyatt, are you not going to be reporting on this anymore because you've been directed not to? What kind of government shit show is this? Unbelievable.
Well, since I don't work for the mainstream media, I will probably decline to take his advice and not report on this because apparently it's that damaging. These leaks, I think a lot of analysts were initially skeptical of, especially the idea that maybe this was kind of a psyop being pushed by, the United States military in an effort to kind of pull the wool over the Russians' eyes. I think a lot of that chatter has died down. I think at this point it's clear that these leaks are genuine. Now, as to whether or not the information contained in these documents is accurate, I think that's an entirely separate question. But it does appear that these documents are in fact genuine. We've seen a number of circumstantial evidence that would seem to confirm that, including the apparent usage of data from these documents by United Kingdom Defense Minister Ben Wallace, who on February 15th cited the figure that is contained in these documents of 97% military engagement on the part of Russia. He said Russia is 97% of its military capabilities have been committed to Ukraine. We see that exact number contained in these documents. Another sort of evidence to me, at least, that these are indeed genuine documents. Now, as to whether or not they are accurate, I think that's a secondary question. It appears, judging from the leaked documents that I have personally seen, that the United States is effectively taking the Ukrainians' word for it in terms of the casualty figures. So far, we have seen emphasis from the media on a lot of the information, specifically the idea that these documents demonstrate a glut of ammunition, a shortage of ammunition, I should say, and that has been kind of a main focal point for a lot of mainstream media reporting, sort of insisting, well, this proves that we need to funnel still more weapons, military hardware to the Ukrainian regime. Major point that I have not seen picked up by much of the mainstream reporting is something that journalist Michael Tracy pointed out when referencing the original reporting on the first batch of leaks that came out in the New York Times 3 days ago. A direct quote from the Times here says, one official said it was likely that the documents did not come from Ukrainian officials because they did not have access to the specific plans which bear the imprint of the offices of the Pentagon's Joint Staff. As Michael Tracy pointed out, he said, quote, translation, Ukraine officials don't have access to their own war planning materials, which are the sole property of the U.S. Obviously, kind of a humorous take on that, but it bears the imprint of reality. I mean, this is obviously something a lot of us have been saying for months, really since the beginning of this conflict, since February 2022, when what had then been a Ukrainian civil war turned into a full-on proxy war. We have all been saying that this is a proxy war. We've, those of us who have kind of a skeptical sensibility about what's happening, it's been very clear that this has been managed by the United States, and now we have the documents to confirm that.
Right. Yeah, the U.S. is planning all of this and using Ukrainians as the soldiers rather than Americans, which in, I guess, one way is a good thing. We don't really want American boots on the ground, but at the same time, just really showcasing that the U.S. doesn't care about Ukrainian lives, rather than focusing on brokering a peace deal, just continuing to use Ukrainians and as a shield in this proxy war, without any regard to the mass casualties that the Ukrainians have been dealing with. And so let's talk more about the casualties. So the documents show a variety of different numbers. So this is why some people are saying that they're doctored. So they're not. They're saying that the numbers are all over the place. There's what's published, and then there's the reality. Of course, no one really knows the reality. It seems like the reality when it comes to casualty numbers are very difficult to get. But this is a key, one of the keys. I don't know how much it will affect the actual American appetite for this war. It would be different if it were American casualties, but these are Ukrainian casualties. What's the number that the U.S. has been saying versus what these papers and versus what you think reality is according to other sources in your investigation, covering this war in general?
Well, we've heard a variety of claims from the United States and from Western officials, ranging from the tens of thousands to, at one point, the president of the European Union Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, actually publicly admitted that 100,000 Ukrainians had been killed in the fighting in a speech, and that speech was subsequently removed from the European Commission's social media pages, and the offending footage was removed. It was edited out, and then they re-uploaded that same video without her saying that 100,000 Ukrainians had been killed. So we've heard kind of estimates all over the place. The estimates contained within the original undoctored documents suggested that between 16,000 and 17,500 Ukrainian soldiers had been killed in action over the past year and some change, which is a ludicrously low estimate. Anyone who's been paying attention to even specific theaters, your mark, it's quite likely that more than that number of Ukrainian soldiers have been killed just in Bakhmut, right? We're talking about killing fields. We're talking about hundreds of casualties every single day. There's no way that number could seriously be that low, which is why, as I noted earlier, this seems to indicate that the United States is effectively accepting the claims of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry on their face, which is, really any any observer of this who's not a full-on partisan of the Ukrainian position would tell you that it's likely that both sides are massaging their figures, right?
Right.
That's just the nature of war. So to accept the Ukrainian numbers, on their face is really to accept anything that the Ukrainian government has been saying. I think at this point it's kind of silly. We know they say one thing and do another very frequently.
Hmm.
So, that's probably not going to give you the most realistic portrait of what's happening if you were just taking their numbers straight.
Yeah, the numbers for sure. People want to lower the number because they want to keep the appetite for the war going. So if you really knew the full magnitude of the death that this war has caused, then maybe if you don't know, if you're just ignorant to that, then you say, yeah, keep going, keep giving weapons, let's keep battling until the Russians are gone. When you actually find out the true number, that's when you say, wait a minute, is this really a good idea? This seems to be causing way more damage than we can really sustain. I mean, people are just saying that's it, no more. We won't let any more of ours die. Because these are Ukrainians, it will take the Ukrainian population to actually rise up and say no more, which is what Zelensky actually admitted to recently, saying that Battle of Bakhmut, this is going to be it. Because any more, the Ukrainian people will say, this is enough now. We cannot sustain any more casualties. So you know that number's got to be very, very high. So that is something that is certainly disputed in these documents. Who do you think is most likely to have released these documents? So the U.S. government is saying Russia was behind the leak. But I guess it comes down to who has the most to gain, or what would be the motivation for leaking these? Or is somebody just from the inside leaking them because they just want people to know what's going on, even though these documents themselves don't necessarily seem to be accurate in and of themselves. It seems like the Pentagon is lying to themselves, like you mentioned, by just taking the lowest figure that the Ukrainian ministry gives them. They're like, okay, yeah, we'll just run with that, rather than actually the truth, which even Mossad has gotten some actual numbers from Ukraine and from Russia. They're kind of playing a neutral on the whole thing, being friendly to both Ukraine and to Russia. So you're more likely to get accurate numbers out of Mossad. But even then,
Mhm.
what kind of numbers can they get? Russia's still going to be giving them a massaged number, and so is Ukraine, right? But who do you think has the most to gain from this leak?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I do think that is actually separate from the question of who is actually responsible. I mean, I don't really view the United States as gaining a whole lot out of this, which is why I don't think it's some kind of deep fake plant story, um, because again, it seems to confirm a lot of the more pessimistic outlooks that you've been hearing from kind of the realist caucus of the U.S. foreign policy establishment, saying basically there's not a chance that the Ukrainians are going to be able to really make any progress this year. One of the documents describes the rest of 23 as likely to end up in a stalemate. So, this is messaging that they have been trying very hard to avoid getting out into the public and spending quite a bit of energy attempting to refute. But privately, it seems that this is the perspective that they have as well, that, the Ukrainian military has been just kind of ground into dirt, and that it's not going to be capable of any real offensive action for the rest of 2023. So, frankly, to me, I think the most likely culprit is kind of a disgruntled U.S. official who's not pleased with the direction that all of this is going. Kind of the same, our understanding, at least, of where the story about Nord Stream uh, bombing came from, right? The Biden administration's bombing of the Nord Stream pipelines. According to Seymour Hersh, that Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who broke the story, that came from at least one disgruntled member of kind of the bombing, the diving community, which was tasked with carrying out that terrorist bombing. So to me, I do have a sense that there is quite a bit of discontent within the United States foreign policy establishment, within the United States military, people looking around and saying, we're bombing allies, We're basically grinding this whole nation into bones and blood just to fight this proxy war that doesn't seem to be, we don't seem to be winning. So, what is the solution here? I think for some people, really there is no alternative other than to just kind of leak this stuff, get it out into the public, and hopefully from their perspective, change a few minds, and at least kind of get the ball rolling the other direction to where the American public is not thinking about why should we be fighting to take out Vladimir Putin, but thinking about why don't we start focusing on some of these many, many problems we have here at home.
Yeah, parts of me thinks that maybe the leak came and from somebody from the inside because they're wanting us to refocus our efforts towards China. They realize that this is a war that's going to be lost, that there's no helping Ukraine, that Ukrainians themselves are growing weary of this and are going to want to go to the table. And so they're probably trying to figure out a way to optically maneuver around that. There is going to come a time, there's no doubt, that Zelensky's going to say enough is enough. We have to go to the table with Putin and do a negotiation. Part of that negotiation is going to be losing chunks of Ukraine. That's inevitable. So the question is, how are they going to figure this out? How are they going to spin that? How are they going to sell that to the American people, to all the NATO allies, to all the citizens that have been draining resources into this war? So part of me wonders if this is an attempt to get to that point of, well, they're going to have to go to the table. Here's the truth. Time for a peace agreement. Now let's refocus our efforts on China. Because otherwise, these types of leaks, I just think they tend to, like with Seymour Hersh and the reporting with Nord Stream pipeline, you just see this get swept under the rug. I mean, they just don't even bring it up. They don't acknowledge it at all. And with this one, they're at least acknowledging it, which makes me wonder, they're not confirming, saying, yes, these are definitely our paper, but they're all but confirming it. I mean, you got John Kirby saying, don't report on this. And he's like, I'm not going to confirm it, but he's also not denying it. So maybe there's an agenda there to shift the military-industrial complex towards the South China Sea, towards China in general. Maybe. I don't know what other sort. I could see Russia's motivation if they were the ones who have somehow got access to this information and leaked it. That's also embarrassing for the U.S. government that somebody inside of Russia could gain access to this sort of information. But from the U.S. side, the fact that this is all over the news, the fact that they are essentially acknowledging this, I then start to question what's the end game with it? Maybe China.
Well, you're certainly not wrong to have that critical instinct. I don't think I'm the same way. I always want to know, why am I being told about any given story? What do they want to get me to think, right? That's kind of how I approach the mainstream media. And certainly that is kind of the dominant force behind the mainstream American politicians who are criticizing this proxy war with Russia. You listen to someone like Matt Gaetz, he very openly admits that his main issue with this proxy war is that it's distracting from the real war that he wants to fight, the war with China. That's the real kind of world war we should be fighting, is sort of the perspective. And I do think that is probably the dominant force in any situation where this is getting leaked out. I think that's probably the motivating factor behind the leak, and probably a pretty significant motivation for covering it as well. I don't know. To me, there is a part of me that thinks, especially the liberal establishment, is not really ready for a full-on war with China. I still think, in some part of me, that there is a level of reason there within kind of the elites that they're not going to shoot themselves in the foot so thoroughly with China. Hopefully, they've learned a little bit of a lesson with Russia.
It would be beyond.
They make all of our stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be shooting themselves in the foot at this point if they're going to be going after China as well as Russia. It's shooting themselves in the groin. I mean, this is like next level insanity.
Yeah, taking two guns, pointing them straight at the head.
Yeah,
just not taking any chances there.
Really interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly that is the strongest political faction in terms of the groups who are opposed to the proxy war with Ukraine. So I can
Yeah.
certainly see that being a possibility.
Well, I look forward to more reports on these leaks, even though John Kirby told everybody not to. I mean, do you think that the media is going to follow suit? You think that they're actually going to say, okay, then we're not going to report on this because the government said not to?
I actually do think they will kind of let's take instructions from Papa
Jeez.
Kirby. I do kind of think this will get pushed out of the A pages. He said he doesn't want to see it on the front page. Maybe it'll be in B or C.
Yeah.
We'll see. I I really just you don't get to that level in mainstream media without being willing to take a few orders from people like Kirby. So I would guess that we will see the coverage kind of diminish a little bit, but I mean they've really covered this thoroughly for the past few days. So it would be kind of weird if they just went complete radio silence tomorrow. I think probably they'll start toning it down a little bit. Maybe we'll see it drop off next
Yeah.
week. Who knows?
Wyatt, thank you so much for joining us. Really, appreciate your insight, and we'll see how these papers unfold. We'll see if there's more leaks, potentially more papers. But thank you so much for joining us. How can people find your work?
You can follow me on Twitter at WyattReed13. I'm on Telegram as well, Wyatt Reed, and WyattReed.substack.com. So you can find my work on all those outlets if you want to keep in touch with what I'm putting out.
Great. Thank you so much, Wyatt.
Thank you, Kim.
Well, it's no secret we're experiencing out of control inflation. And even though the Fed keeps raising rates, it's not really working, which means something else could be going on. Now, long-term bonds have diminished in value. Banks, they're going under. Depositors are holding their breath. Investors are bailing on bank stocks. Diversification has never been more important. The recent surge in gold prices is directly tied to the extreme market volatility right now, and this is why gold has historically been a great hedge against the stock market and against inflation. So now would be a great time to think about diversifying into gold with Birch Gold Group. Birch Gold makes it easy to convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in precious metals. Here's what you need to do. Visit birchgold.com/Kim to get your free info kit on gold. They're going to help you convert your existing IRA or 401k that's tied to a volatile market into an IRA in precious metals, gold and silver, and it's all tax sheltered. So visit birchgold.com/Kim to claim your free info kit on gold today.